on the Asian marine industry situation. He visits many countries, he works and advises for many of the top international brands in our industry, and we are very, very fortunate for Mike to be here today to share his current thoughts on the state of the industry. Please welcome Michael Derret.
Thank you, Tim, for that very nice introduction. And good morning to everyone. I can see some familiar faces here, and I hope that you'll enjoy today's conference. Just a little bit initially, I'll just give you a quick little bit of background about myself. I've been boating and flying. You can see a little aeroplane in the picture there for 51 years as a pilot, and also I started a boating career at the same time about 50 years ago. Was initially a sailing instructor and have worked in the industry all that since then. I've been fortunate to visit virtually all of the Asian countries over the past 26 years, doing a large variety of projects, mainly in the leisure marine industry, with some commercial small ferry and military boat projects as well. I run a little consultancy. We're based in the UK, but all of our activities are in the Middle East and Asia, which is really the area of growth for our business. Also the correspondent for a website called ibinews.com. We also produce a magazine, and this is entirely trade focused for the worldwide market. Do have a look at the website, and you'll see lots of stories every day that come along. Just a little resume of what I'd like to talk to you about today. Firstly, the global economic and industry update. Give us a overview of what's happening in the big wide world. And the world's a small place now for the marine industry, of course. We'll have a look at the Asian markets, see what's going on around this area in the boating industry. And also look at some manufacturing trends which I see have come in a lot in our industry in the last 10 years. And as Tim mentioned, the keynote of this conference day is safety. And I'd like to bring some experiences I've had in this boating industry to you towards the end of my presentation. So, firstly, global economic update. As you probably know, the US is in economic recovery, which is great news. And we'll look at how that's affecting the boat industry in a moment. Europe is still suffering from what we call sovereign debt, which means countries basically have overspent and borrowed too much. And that's going to still take some time to recover. Fortunately, the UK is in a recovery situation, and that is tending to drive improving economic factors in the rest of Europe. As we know, in Asia, the economies have grown here for the past 20 years and are still on an upward trend, maybe a slight hiccup in the growth curves, but they're still all positive. So how's this affecting the global marine industry? ICOMIA is the International Council of Marine Industry Associations. It's the worldwide body for the marine trade associations. Has about 35 members representing most of the countries in Europe and of course America, and a lot of Asian countries including Singapore and China. They describe in their annual report, recent one last November, as the markets are still very challenging around the world for our industry. Not surprising, given the global economic crisis we've suffered since 2007. So, look at some hard figures in the second line down. According to Beneteau, which is a large leisure boat manufacturer based in France and usually very accurate with their forecasting and figures, they estimated the market since 2008 has fallen by over 50%. As you can see, in money terms, down to 5.7 billion euros from 12.2. But they also indicate that this year, 2014, that there will be an upturn in the global growth of between 1% and 2%. That's certainly good news. But European boat sales are still at a very low level, so most of this growth is coming from new markets such as Asia, Middle East, Africa, South America. So the US market looks like improving by about 14%, which it did last year. It'll probably grow a similar amount this year. As I mentioned earlier, Asia, Africa and the Middle East, they're the main contributors to global marine industry, leisure, boating growth. You might be surprised when I put Africa down on that list. But I've seen some reports by leading industry members that Africa is the new China for the boating industry, and I would agree with that. I've seen quite a lot of boat sales going into Africa through the Middle East, which is one of the supply channels. So it's certainly a market to keep an eye on, as well as Asia, of course. Super yacht sector, which is basically the large yachts over 24 metres, is starting to get more confidence and growing again as the number of ultra-high net worth individuals grow again, especially in Asia. We've seen Europe as the target for some takeovers, especially with large companies, and I mentioned Ferretti Group, which is one of the largest Italian boat manufacturing groups, which has been taken over effectively by Chinese entrepreneurs, as Sunseeker, which is based in the UK, has also been taken over by Chinese entrepreneurs. I'm sure we're going to see some more of this type of development in the near future, as a lot of large boat manufacturing companies in Europe and the US are still not in the best of financial health. So, what's happening on the manufacturing side? We'll look at that in a little bit more detail in a moment, but traditional boat manufacturing methods are changing very quickly. There's much more use of technology. So instead of someone on a bandsaw cutting wood, he's actually driving a computer-controlled machine, as you can see on the picture in the slide. That's what's increasingly happening. So technology is now becoming more important than low labour cost in boat manufacturing. 10 years ago, anyone who wanted to manufacture low-cost boats would probably go to somewhere in Central Europe, such as Poland, or they would think about manufacturing in China. That whole mindset is changing now, and as I said, we'll look at that in a bit more detail. So, what about the customer? What trends are coming out of the market? Well, since 2008, there's a definite trend not to display wealth, especially in Europe and the States. It's not the done thing to flash your money, to put it crudely. So that's affected our market. People are much more concerned about security and the environment. And I would add to that safety, of course, as well, which we're going to touch on today. So what has this meant to the market? Well, there's a trend to more established boat designs. If you look at the slide, you can see these boats, and this picture was taken in 115 Marina in Singapore quite recently. You can see these boats are rather more traditional, these two boats here. They're what we call semi-displacement hull designs. They probably do maximum speed of 22 knots. They're very seaworthy, but they're not, shall we say, as sexy as the modern flybridge. But this sector of the market has certainly improved as people don't want to flash their wealth, and also people get more aware of the pleasures of cruising, and they're getting more conscious of on the use of fuel, because these boats are, of course, more fuel efficient. So what's also happened since 2008, people are more concerned about the value of their investment in a boat. In 2008 and prior to that, in a lot of markets, people would look at leisure boating, oh, that looks an interesting activity to do, and they would buy it. So they'd probably buy from the heart by looking at the boat, thinking, oh, I like the look of that product. But now they're much more likely to consider other factors like, what's the boat going to be worth in a few years' time? Is it going to preserve its value? Is the manufacturer still going to be in business, even? Because that will affect the residual value, won't it? So people now buy a boat more from the mind, from the head, by probably even doing a spreadsheet and to compare all the different costs and operating costs of a particular boat. So that is people have become much more careful on their purchasing decisions. In the West, and talk about Europe and the US, the customer is generally getting older quite quickly. The average age of the boater in Europe and the US is increasing quite fast, which is disturbing, really. Why are not young people getting interested in boating in the West? It's quite a keynote question. But in the East, in Asia, where we are here, we see boating as a very interesting pastime for the young. So the average age of the boater here in Asia is quite young. Many of them are young entrepreneurs and made considerable amounts of money and want to entertain their friends. And it's a new fashionable thing to do, which it was, of course, in Europe 30 or 40 years ago. Just to get a little bit technical, if you'll excuse me on that, this bubble chart, on the bottom scale, the horizontal scale here, shows the size of the market. And as you can see, the US, which is the biggest boating market in the world, is at the right of the scale, followed by Europe, Australasia. The vertical scale is ease of access to the market. How easy is it as a manufacturer to sell my product in that market? So that's governed by legislation, financial issues, propensity of people to buy a leisure product. How many marinas are there? Are they readily available? Is it fairly low cost to keep a boat? And with my colleague YP Loke in Singapore, we've developed this over the years, and you can see, for example, that Japan is quite a sizable leisure boating market on the scale here. There's actually about 240,000 leisure boats in Japan over 5 meters in length. but it's not very high on the ease of access scale, because importing a boat in Japan is an involved process. You have to meet technical standards, and you have to have the right distributor who is going to provide after-sales service in Japan. It's a big key issue. So not an easy market to enter, but if you find the right distributor there, a great market in the long term. Have a look at Southeast Asia. Well, it's relatively easy to enter the Southeast Asian boating market. Not a lot of restrictions. South Korea, even easier, where we are here, because the government emphasis on boating over the last 7 years has made the marina networks grow, and it's seen as an attractive pastime by the government and the provinces, so they're busy promoting. The new markets such as China and India are right down here on the bottom. There's not many boats in China, probably about 4,000 boats, and not easy to access the China market, and not easy to use a boat in China because of the legislation. In India a little bit easier, but there's only about 2,000 leisure boats in India. A quick look at where we are in Asia here. Southeast Asia, which of course Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines. We estimate something like 12,000 leisure boats over 5 metres. Lots of islands. It's a great market for boating, great place to go in a boat. Lots of island destinations, something like 25,000 islands. And the market's been growing quite steadily since 2008, especially in Singapore and Phuket in Thailand. We're more in Northeast Asia, where we are now. There are about 6,000 plus boats in Hong Kong over 5 metres, something like 4,000 in China, although those numbers are difficult to identify in China. Easy in Hong Kong because they have a pretty strict registration process. Interesting that Japan has actually lost boat numbers. This time last year, after the Korea Boat Show, I went to Japan for a week and met with some colleagues in the Japanese Boating Industry Association. And the boat numbers in Japan were something like 300,000 20 years ago. They're now down to 240,000. And that's of great concern to the association there. Young people are not coming into the activity in Japan. But in Japan they have also a scrapping program for boats. Generally boats are not kept longer than 10 years. And I think that follows their government policy of scrapping cars after 10 years. It tends to spin over to boats. A lot of those used boats in Japan end up here in South Korea. So here we've got a growing middle-class boating market. I think if you look at the boat show here, you'll notice probably the largest boat in the hall here is 34 feet. And if you look in the marinas, there's a lot of boats in the size range 25 to 35 feet. And that's great to see. It's got a lot of potential here for middle-class boating. And if you consider Hong Kong and Singapore is generally a larger boat market, because comparatively it's expensive to keep a boat in Hong Kong and Singapore because the coastline is restricted, which drives up the price of waterside property, so it makes marinas expensive to develop. And there's limited cruising grounds really, especially in Hong Kong, more so, better in Singapore. November last year I went to China. I looked at a large number of leisure boats in the marina in China, There's two markets in China. If you go below in a leisure boat of anything over about 45 feet, this is the sort of cabin layout you'll see in a lot of boats. And it's a lot of karaoke equipment, there's mahjong tables, and less sleeping accommodation. But these boats are used a lot by clubs and companies to entertain their clients. But you also see other Chinese clients who want to aim to look more Western, probably, and they'll be buying sophisticated boats with an interior like this one. So there's two distinct markets for bigger leisure boats in China. The first category is generally produced locally in China, and there's some good production coming out of the Chinese yards now. And this type of boat with a more, shall we say, Western interior is generally imported and generally owned by a client who uses it himself and just entertains his friends rather than for club use. I want to turn a little bit to what's happened in the boating market in terms of manufacturing. Boating industry is being driven now by technology, which would be unheard of 20 years ago. 20 years ago, boat building was very much a hand process, and probably the only technology you'd have would be a bandsaw or a planer for making the interior in wood. Everything else would be completely hand done. There would be no computer-aided design. Everything was done on a drawing board, and that would all have to be translated into a plug for the mould to make the mould, which is all done by hand. Now that's changed considerably, and I want to profile a company which is called Majesty Yachts. It also goes by the name of Gulfcraft, which is based near Dubai. It's one of my clients, has been for 20 years, and we've moved a lot into the technology game over the past 7 years. This is the largest current boat that we manufacture is this one, which is 135 feet long. And this boat was built for an Arab sheikh in Saudi Arabia. It's his own choice of colouring. Number 7, I was told, means that this is his number 7 toy. Anyway, this is the type of boat we go up to, but we also build from 27 feet. So we're also very much in the middle class boat market. So how does Gulfcraft Majesty Yachts manufacture these days? It's completely changed since it started 30 years ago. This business, it uses a lot of computer-aided design, CAD, and this, I'm sorry about that. This gentleman here, who's from the Philippines, and we employ a lot of Filipinos, he's working in the design office. So he's not on a drawing board these days, of course, he's on a computer. And we have 8 of these guys doing the initial designs for the yachts, all on computer. And also, when we have clients come who want something semi-custom, in other words, they want something different, these guys design something on the computer for the customer, and we produce a 3D rendering of what the boat will look like, what the interior will look like, so the customer can see what his interior ideas will look like. And what we've found over the years is that many people don't understand drawings these days. You have to be quite technical to understand a plan and a drawing, but they understand a rendering, a picture. So that's how we do it. So once we get everything agreed, the final drawings are done, and we have another team who then translate those drawings. They translate into digital files which are used by the machines, which I'll show you the machines we use. So we have about 7 to 8 people on the design team, and we have another 30 who, in an office, translating those drawings, those CAD drawings, into digitised files so the machines that I'll show you can produce all of the components. So we're reducing as much as possible the handwork. So what sort of machines do we use? Well, this is a computer numerically controlled router. Now that cuts wood, and it can also cut fiberglass, and it can not metal. We use other machines for that. Now that substantially cuts all of the wooden interior for a yacht. Obviously the fiberglass hull still has to be made by semi-traditional methods. You can't robotise that, but you can make all of the wooden parts. Now the advantage of doing it by computer and machine obviously are that they are cut very accurately. They fit within 1 millimetre. So when you come to fit the parts in the yacht, they all fit together. There's no trimming required. If a boat manufacturer says he uses a lot of craftsmanship in his boat, I suspect a lot that the parts don't fit. So it actually doesn't send a good message to someone who might understand the process. So the router does all the jobs are given to the machines every day. In fact, we run 2 shifts on those, and so we cut the parts for all of the different yachts. We also produce our own veneers, cut our own veneers for the plywood. So the basic plywood can then have the finish that the customer wants, and we stock a lot of different veneers. And that goes into a veneering machine, so it goes onto the base plywood. We also have water jet cutting machines, which are quite advanced, and they can cut any sort of metal, virtually, and they cut all our component parts, all our fittings we make in-house. We don't rely much on bought-in stuff. And we have several water jet cutting machines, and they can also, that's the water jet machine, sorry the slide's a bit dark, job list, that's a bit dark, but it's actually a piece of marble. We cut all of the marble for the larger yachts on the water jet cutting machine. And we produce all our own tanks using metal bending machines, and which are then welded together. So, as much as possible is built using technology these days. The factory is quite big. We have 1,700 staff now, and 3 factory sites in the Middle East, and the business is growing a lot. And it's only growing because of technology. The Chief Operating Officer, Erwin Bamps, here has introduced all of these systems over the past 7 years, really transformed the factory. This is a mid-sized boat coming out of the factory. And technology, of course, has to extend to your lifting. This is a 150-ton hoist. And if you're going to go and build bigger yachts, which we are, then we also have you have to have a even bigger machine. That's a 500-ton lift machine. So that's okay. That's how we use technology. So summary: CAD and CAM are vital. Technology is becoming more important than low labour cost. Companies that don't invest in the boat technology will die. I want to talk quickly, and Tim's given me the incentive to push on, about safety. And I want to just describe very quickly a trip I did on the water some 2 months ago in the Middle East. And I'm not going to mention the country, but I'll tell you why later. This is the boat that my wife and I went on from a marina to an island, to a remote destination about 30 miles away on this boat. We turned up on that 36-foot boat, and first thing I noticed was there was a sign, life jackets under your seat. So being a little bit safety aware, having been involved with boats and aviation for 50 years, I lifted up the seat to see where the life jackets were. Nothing. There was only 4 of us on the boat as passengers, so I went round the rest of the boat, looked under the seats, no life jackets. Went to ask the skipper, this gentleman sitting here, and he could hardly speak English, and he shrugged his shoulders and pointed to the toilet. I looked in there and the life jackets were lying on the bottom of the toilet, all covered in mess and everything else. So you can't really say they're life jackets. At this point, I was rather suspect. Next thing I noticed is, as we're going along, immediately the guy goes from low speed to as fast as he can go and puts his feet on the dashboard here. Turns up the radio, stereo, with some local pop music. And we go as fast as possible with a cold engine, which is the quickest way to ruin 2 outboard motors. And then I noticed that the boat is inclined by about 15 degrees. And you can see a better illustration of that there. And you can see the beautiful coastline, but you can see the boat's on an angle. And I'm immediately concerned why that is. And we arrive at the destination, beautiful place, quite remote. And I just want to summarise what happened on this trip. The engines were actually fitted wrongly. There was 2 same rotation engines fitted, instead of 1 left-hand rotation, 1 right-hand rotation. So the prop effect just twisted the boat. Now that is totally inexcusable and very bad practice. No engine kill cord, which is the cord that if you're driving a small boat, you should have a cord which attaches to the dash panel. You fall over, stops the engine. That was not used. The driving was extremely unsafe. There was no flares, radio, first aid kit, safety equipment. Helmsman, I later found out, was not qualified at all. His only qualification that he was a national of that country, which was what was required. No, he gave no safety briefing. I'm sure if I'd have asked him, he wouldn't know what I meant. And there was obviously any awareness of a safety culture there. So that was extremely disturbing. When I got back to the marina, I went to see the marina manager, who explained to me that he knew this was going on, he couldn't do anything about it. And he then told me that 3 people in the last 3 years had nearly died on these boats. Firstly, someone fell over, a kid was on the bow, and the boat went over a wave, and the kid fell off, went underneath the boat and was cut up by the outboard motors. Nearly died, had to be in hospital for 2 months. Same thing happened the year after that, and another incident happened at a docking the year after that. I am in the process of following this up with the Ministry of Tourism of this country, because it's disgraceful. Now, there is a strong safety culture, and we're going to hear about that from James in the next presentation, in Europe and the US about boating. There is not a strong safety culture in the Middle East and Asia, and we need to change that. Okay, move on to other things. That nice looking yacht. But if you look carefully, you might see that the straps that are holding it in the port, where it's about to be launched, are rather far aft. So what happened? It slipped out the strops. This is in Dubai, actually. And you can see someone clutching, who was on the boat while it was being lifted and shouldn't have been, hanging on to the back there. So what happened? There we are, 2 people in the water. Fortunately, no one died. Okay, so safety is not just on the water, it's messing about with boats, delivering them. My times in Asia and the Middle East, I have personally seen quite a lot of these incidents. I didn't see this particular one, but a colleague of mine did take these pictures at the time, or obtained them. What's happened here? This is in India. What's happened here? The crane's tried to lift the boat up, and the boat's heavier than the crane can lift. So it's pulled the crane down on the top of the boat. A write-off. Fortunately, no one got injured. Is that a one-off? Probably not, because same thing has happened in China. There we go, look. So India, China, Middle East, very lack of safety awareness, and we need to improve that for sure. I do a lot of flying. I'm an instructor and an examiner in light aircraft. We have a strong safety culture in teaching people to fly, and as an examiner I'm always looking to develop a situation for people. We're flying now, what if the engine fails? What if we have an engine fire? What are you going to do? We have to do that in boating. That happened in America. Don't know how it happened, but interesting situation. And last slide now, because I can see Tim's urging me on. Korea. What are the opportunities here? Hybrid power? Yes, for boats. You have a very good manufacturing sector here in Korea. Very capable of taking on these projects that are looking at the future. Driverless boat systems. I won't talk more about that at the moment, we haven't got time. Develop technology and systems for boat building. Computer-controlled machines, you're very good at that here. Introduce low-cost launching sites to develop the market. And as I mentioned earlier, very vital, develop a safety culture for boating. Think out of the box, new ideas. On Wednesday I had the pleasure of visiting the factory, shipyard, where this is manufactured. It's called Wingship. It's a winging ground effect craft. It's a groundbreaking project for the Korean marine industry, and great to see. So that's the conclusion of my talk.